we've been talking, as I said, we've been talking about sleep and dreams. And I probably of those two, dreams are more interesting than sleep. But I remember something that Swami once said. When I can't help but be aware of dreams, and you notice them, and they're interesting. And I remember in the first years that I was practicing meditation and new to these teachings, I became quite interested in the first few years about dreams because I had some very interesting dreams and sleep experiences. And this was all very new to me. And so naturally, I began to pursue it. But then I remember Swamiji once cautioning a group of us because somebody had asked him questions about astral entities and such sort of things that sometimes we encounter certain phenomena in dreams. And he warned us about it. And he says, it's fascinating, yes, but there's a truth to it. And he says, generally, he says, be cautious when you pursue these topics because there are negative influences there, and you don't want to be encountering that sort of thing and getting involved with that. Fascinating though it might be. And in his book, The Path, he recounts such an experience there where he had some encounter with some dark entities, and Master warned him away from that. And so I took that to heart because I had some things similar to that. And I said, no, I don't want to get involved in that. And it was something of a side issue to me. But I think also I remember him saying something also, and he wrote, it's in his writings at some point. He said, remember, he says, we're trying to get away from karma, and dreams too, there's a karmic element in dreams. And so to the degree you get involved in dreams and on the subconscious level, you also are creating karma. And so he would, in a sense, he was very gently saying, so why bother? Now, so I took that to heart. I haven't been very interested in the topic for many years, but this, I thought about it being this topic was of some interest. And so lately I have been watching my own dreams, as perhaps some of you have too, because we've been talking about this. And it is a fascinating topic. And so consequently, I also remembered the positive side of it, that the ability to distinguish between the positive and the negative side is, I think, the critical thing here. Master, and you could see even in Master's writings, when he introduces this topic, talks about it, he says, be careful, don't get involved with negative energies. He says, but there is a positive side. And so I think I'm saying this because it takes some discrimination on our part to explore topics like this. And how do we tell? And I think it doesn't come so much when we're talking about what does this mean and that mean in dreams. It's mostly about the feeling that we get, to being attuned to the inner feeling that we have. If a dream feels, because a superconscious dream, as Master said, is something positive, and it's come to us as guidance, perhaps, but we have to recognize the difference between superconsciousness and subconsciousness. And this whole topic is underlying what we've been saying, learning to be able to recognize that in our life and be able to control that so we can use the subconsciousness as a positive guidance because it has a positive place in our life, but avoiding those parts of the subconscious that are merely frivolous or have no, you could say, use for us in a positive way. And so the dream state has those two elements to it. And to be able to see what the difference is: subconscious, conscious, superconscious. And superconsciousness, if we've never had an experience in superconscious, is hard to explain. But once we begin to meditate and we begin to make some progress in meditation, we begin to notice that the superconsciousness is infused with one particular quality, a couple of qualities. Let me explain. It's calming. There's a calmness to it. It's not exciting. It's not the excitation of the heart, the excitation of the feelings. There's a calm, permeating feeling of calmness that goes with that, and a clarity of vision. It's very clear. You might say even clarity in the sense, in a visual sense, like colors are bright, not muddy or obscure. There's a sense, and this is the second one, calm and expansive. There's a sense of expansiveness. And whenever, as we've said many times in these classes, whenever there is a sense of an expansiveness of awareness, there's also an upliftment, a joy level that goes up. So the sense of happiness, of joyfulness, of deepening of our awareness that accompanies when we have a superconscious vision, clarity begins to come. And so these are the things to look for in your dreams. Otherwise, you could say there's somewhat of a distraction, and they're karma inducing, just do a little bit. Even though they may be fantasies, nevertheless, our thoughts do have power. So those are the things when people ask questions, like one of the questions was, a person was asked one of the questions about having dreams of, or mentioning dreams of different planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, and so on. And from what I know is that my suggestion is that probably those are subconscious impressions, and because perhaps rather than, oh, I dream of Saturn, so that's probably some Saturn influence astrologically on me, or Jupiter representing Guru, of course, is, well, maybe that's Guru in the form of that planet. Well, it's possible, but probably just the image itself of the specific is not necessarily that. It's the feeling that accompanies that. Now, dreaming of planets and cosmic gases and galaxies has an element of expansiveness. Now, if you came in early, you saw Bara put a very nice picture on the screen of galaxies and space, and it immediately gives a sense of cosmic expansion. Now, so consequently, if you have that feeling behind whatever it is of the specific image, pay attention to that. And if it's a feeling of expansion, that's an auspicious sign of spiritual progress, of spirit, because it's a reflective of that you're making perhaps deeper progress in your spiritual efforts. So this ability to the feeling, because most dreams, even superconscious dreams, have a mixture of the subconscious, and that usually expresses itself in the particular image, tends to be subconscious to some degree, but the feeling is what indicates whether it's subconscious more so than superconsciousness. And so in this regard, I'd like to answer a few questions with those preliminary cautionary remarks. I've seen them here somewhere. Okay. I mentioned one. There was the one about dreams of expansion and planets and so on, like that. I think I've answered that. Another person asked me about dreams about water and water bodies, the sea and floods, and they said maybe that's caused by a full bladder when one goes to sleep. Possibly that's true, but it's also those dreams of water bodies and water bodies and fluid. If accompanied by an uplifting feeling, a sense of fluidity that's pleasant, those are auspicious dreams. Now, I can't say exactly what they might mean, but generally that sense of fluidity is, it's associated with chakras, and it is generally considered a positive sign, an auspicious sign. I can't say what exactly it would relate to, but it is generally a positive thing. And the question another person asked about questions of seeing people in dreams and perhaps departed, people that have passed away in dreams. And this is a subject that Master did address, and I think we've even talked about it in previous discussions, that Master said when a person passes, there's sometimes a loved one, somebody that you loved and somebody that loved you, that there is a tendency oftentimes for that person trying to make contact, especially as that soul is transitioning. And that is natural. And that person is sending perhaps prayers to and asking for prayers and wanting to make that natural contact that a departed loved one would. And to reciprocate with prayers for that person is a very good thing. Now, if you have, as time goes by and you continue to have thoughts of that person, that it's possible that, as Master said, that person is trying to make contact with you. They keep, there's a longing there. And if you have reciprocal thoughts towards that person, says it's okay to try to make contact with that person. And he actually gave a technique by which we could do that. But he prefaced this with the caution that you have to make contact with a departed soul. You must be absolutely sure that the person you're trying to make contact with is a good soul, a good person. He says, because there are entities in the astral world that will try to make contact with you whose intentions are not good for you. It's a soul, you might say, that's longing to take birth again, or it's a person that's longing to experience physical life but no longer with the body. And so they will try to make contact with living souls, and Master calls such souls tramp souls. And you want to stay away from those because there is such a thing as possession. And to allow yourself to be in contact with such souls is a very detrimental thing to do. So, but he said, if it's a loved one who knows that loves you, a person that's departed, family member, a good friend, that they love you and you love them, and you feel some continual longing to make contact, he says you could do that. The first thing, of course, is just to send prayers, send your good wishes, and give your blessings to that person. But if you want to go deeper in that, the technique that Master said you can do requires some effort on your part, because we can send prayers to them, but they're limited. But if we learn to be able to awaken our consciousness in the spiritual eye, we then gain that ability to actually have contact. And so it requires us on our side to be able to see the spiritual eye as a reality. And in that spiritual eye, looking up in the point between the eyebrows, see it in meditation, and eventually, if possible, see the spiritual eye even in waking consciousness. And in the spiritual eye, visualize that departed soul and broadcast a prayer and broadcast your good wishes and broadcast your willingness to call that person into the light, to the spiritual eye. And if you're an advanced enough soul to be able to do that, you will, and that person is wanting to make that contact with you. And if that person has, see, there's conditions here. If that person has the ability to also have some consciousness on the other side in the astral world, that soul will be drawn into that light, the spiritual eye. Now, Master goes on to say in this regard that if that is a very advanced soul on the other side, and you are advanced enough to be able to see them in the spiritual eye, you can actually draw them. Not at first, the first step is their image will appear to you. And he said, but if that soul is an advanced soul and you are advanced enough with your power to be able to call them, you can actually invite them to appear in body. And I was thinking when I read that, this sounds very much like the story in the autobiography of Sri Yukteswar appearing to Master, because Master was advanced and Sri Yukteswar obviously very advanced, and Master was longing for Sri Yukteswar's presence and regretful that he was not able to see him at his passing. And so it's a sense, I think there's some similarity there that struck me. But this, as I said, to be able to even just have that soul appear in the spiritual eye demands that we attain that level of development to be able to see the spiritual eye ourselves. Now, if we can't do that, we do the best approximation of that. And we then, perhaps we don't see that soul, but we can feel, you might say, we feel the connection. And in that connection, we offer our blessings to that person. So these things are reality, and Master offers them to us as for those who have the ability to do that. This is something that can happen. There's another state that was a question was asked to me about. It says, could I talk about out-of-body experiences and that disassociation that sometimes happens during sleep? I'm not sure if you've ever had this experience or not, but I know many people have, and I personally have had this experience. And whoever asked that question has had that experience. And you see it recorded in, sometimes there's articles in magazines and newspapers or internet. People go into surgery and they're put under anesthesia, which is a very interesting state, isn't it? Anesthesia is where basically it's like sleep, but it's I don't know what it is, how to exactly describe it, but we know what it's like if we've ever been in and under anesthesia. But most times they put you under, and next thing you know, you wake up and you have no idea where you've been. But some people have the experience of being conscious. They go out of body. It's like hovering above the body, watching this operation take place. They could see what's happening around them. They could see into another room. And then when they come back, they relate what happened, and they can basically, word for word, yes, that actually did happen. And it's a very remarkable experience, and you might say a objective demonstration of the out-of-body experience. But sometimes in sleep too, why, I don't know, but sometimes we might experience, we find ourselves out of the body. In the room, perhaps, or hovering above our body, but very aware, very conscious. And this is a true experience. And if you've had that, you'll know it's real to you, at least. And it happens on occasionally, and it happens cross-culturally. It's not limited to one culture. And it's like we awaken in our astral body. And sometimes even we can travel a little bit in our astral body. I think, again, we come back to what is the feeling that accompanies that, because it's not something that's recommended we do. It's something, and when it happens, it just happens, not because we've necessarily tried to do it. But I think in general, my understanding is that we shouldn't necessarily try to do this, because it's generally, what is the purpose, you might ask? Does it have a spiritual purpose or practice other than the development of a certain power, you might say? So it's not recommended that something at least by Master, something we try to do, but it's also, you might say, interesting. But the caution here, of course, is that we can get ourselves into trouble with this. And so unless one has a sense of being out of one's body and in the presence of one's guru, then be cautious. Now, sometimes that does happen. I've heard other people relate to me experiences where they've been out of the guru and they've seen out of the body and they've seen guru's presence there. And that probably would have some significance. But again, I would caution you, go by your feeling. If there's a sense of disturbance, of uncertainty, I would always recommend in such situations, call on the Guru, call the Guru, Om Guru, and see what happens then. Call the Guru's presence. And this, in my experience, when I've had this happen to me, I found that immediately I was drawn away from that experience back into the body, but in a pleasant way, And so I can't say much more than that because my experience, I've never felt that it was a good thing for me to start roaming, you might say, in the astral world with that. But it goes again with the feeling that you have with it. Somebody asked the question is, why did Yogananda or Sri Yukteswar say something along the lines of, in sleep, we have a glimpse of that we are gods? It is an interesting, I remember reading that myself somewhere, but I think the reason is because, and this is one of, you might say, one of the educational aspects of dreams and sleep, is it makes us wonder, and as I said in a previous class, if I go to sleep and it seems like dreams are very real to me, then I come back to this world, it makes me question the reality of this reality. Maybe this is a dream too. And as the masters say on a very deep level, this is a dream. It's a cosmic, it's God's dream. It's not our dream. It's God's dream of which we're participating. And it's a dream of that aspect of ourselves that's super conscious. And it makes us question. And because we find it reminds us that these bodies are not who and what we are. So when we have an experience like an out-of-body experience, it can be very educational. I know when that first happened to me, I thought, my goodness, what's this? And then you return to the body and you say, is this body the sum total of who I am? And you begin to think, no, there's something else going on. And so it stimulates one's spiritual curiosity. And so that way, it's very much spiritually stimulating. But this idea of in sleep, we get a glimpse of that we are gods, you might say, God with perhaps a small g rather than a big G. Because in dreams, what we can do, we're not limited, we're expansive. Sometimes we fly in dreams, we fall, and we didn't really die at all. We just woke up. And so consequently, it reminds us that we're more than this body, reminds us that we're not limited. We're godlike, you might say, in our dreams. And so that makes us think. In dreams, we can manifest things in our dreams just by thinking about them sometimes. Well, if that's possible in a dream, might it be possible in waking consciousness as well? And so in that way, I think dreams can be useful if they remind us of our higher potential. Now, I mentioned last time also that Master said an interesting thing, that dreams can be prophetic. In other words, the dreams in our superconscious self, where we unite ourselves with that universal consciousness, the future, past, future don't exist in that same way they do for when we're in consciousness. And the future, you could say, is able to be perceived. And so sometimes, Master said, the superconsciousness will drop these images into our dreams, and they can perhaps help us or warn us or guide us. Now, that's a very philosophical question, because can the future be manipulated? I don't know. I'm not going to try to answer that, but we can see, and perhaps we can be prepared. Not necessarily that we might change the future, but the karma is how we experience the future does come under our control. So consequently, if we know something is coming toward us, how are we going to react to it? If we can be non-afraid and just see it as God's play, and we're perfectly calm, whatever comes to us, we don't react in a certain way, and we just accept it as that's what's come, and we learn from it, and the karma is then mitigated. You might say, no karma is generated, no reactive karma is generated. This is how we want to be generally with karma. When things come that are seemingly terrible, if we can accept them in the right spirit, we see that they didn't affect us, and we don't bounce back or react to them with anger or regret or fear. But if we're caught unaware and we're still very much attached to this body and what's going on here with us, we find ourselves becoming reactive. So maybe in a sense, prophetic dreams of things that are going to happen to us are a way of preparing us, guiding us in our reaction. And if you notice another thing, they say that dogs are very perceptive, or animals in general are very perceptive to a human's fear. So that if you see an animal and it looks like it's going to attack you, try to control that fear because they can sense it. And if you're fearful, they're more likely perhaps to attack you. But if you project lack of fear, the animal responds differently and acts differently. So maybe perceiving the future might be something like that. It's a warning. Don't be afraid. It's just God's hand in another form. And if we're not afraid, somehow we change that future and we react to it in a very different way. It's like that story of Master and the tigers, where they heard he went out to lock the door where the bullocks were being kept when they heard a tiger coming. And then he saw the tiger and he just looked at the tiger with deep love in his eyes and just, God's in me, God's in the tiger, and just saw God there. And the tiger just rolled over, and he went and stroked the tiger, the belly, you might say, of the tiger, and the tiger ran off. Well, if he would have reacted with fear, then that tiger very likely would have attacked. So it is with life. How do we react to life? And dreams perhaps can be helpful in that regard. And so I'm going to ask if there's some questions and answers. I see the Q&A here. And then if we see someone taking money from our cupboard in the dream, does it mean that we are being shown a spiritual defect and should work on trusting more? Or does it mean that we should be more careful and hide money someplace else? Well, here again, you're asking this question, is this dream symbolic or is this dream prophetic? And again, I think in a sense, and as you say, it's a repetitive dream, or at least a couple times this dream has happened. And is this dream seen into the future? Or is this dream seeing something that your own subconscious is trying to tell you? Now, I can't say, but I think it's something to consider. Is it showing you a spiritual, you're hiding something in a cupboard? Or are you storing something in the cupboard? In other words, are you hiding something away from other people's view? Then you might want to say, money can represent many things. It can represent, attachments. Are you hiding your attachments in the cupboard? Or is somebody actually, are they somebody stealing it, and do you feel that sense of attachment that is being taken from you? Or, you might say, are you being less open that perhaps than you should be? Are you duplicitous? Now, these are negative interpretations, but I think you could probably also, not wanting to reveal a spiritual defect or something. And on the other hand, you could look at it positively. Perhaps who is taking that money from? Who is going into that cupboard? Maybe it's God reaching in and wanting to take something from you that is detrimental. And you're perhaps reluctant to do that. So you could see it as a positive opportunity to say that. Or you could, and so that's this says here, trusting more, learn to trust. Or it means perhaps you're not being careful, and you're being a bit lax. So you see, this is a very good thing too. This is a very good example of how dreams can be interpreted in many different ways, positively, negatively, educationally, or instructive, superconsciously, subconsciously. And what you have to do, because all of our dreams are like this. There's an example that how are we going to take them and go by the feeling that you have. Does it cause you anxiety? Or does it cause a sense of, is there a sense of upliftment there? A sense of maybe it's prophetic, as God is wanting to take something away from you that's impeding you. And that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? To be able to take that away. So are you hanging on to it, or are you releasing it? And it goes by the feeling. So you could say circumstances are neutral and we make them positive or negative according to our reaction to them. Well, dreams are much like that. And how do we see it, and what is the feeling that goes with that? Okay, the next one was when you say feeling is in the feeling in the dream, or just on waking up from dream, or later while thinking about it. I think all three. There is a feeling in the dream, like if you're dreaming something, are you in a state of anxiety? I know we all have anxiety dreams. I suspect we all have anxiety dreams of, oh, something's happening. There's that anxiety within the dream. And that's sometimes that anxiety is within ourselves, which we're projecting in the dream in some subconscious fantasy. And so the anxiety is the issue, not what's happening outwardly. Those anxieties, oh, I'm missing my final examination and running from building to building, trying to find it. What's that reflective? It's not the examination, because that's long ago, but it's anxiousness within ourselves. But then as you contemplate on it during the day, and you think about it, and I think you hit upon a good point here. If a dream is vivid or repetitive, meditate on it and try to meditate, and first get calm and then hold it up. And what was the feeling that accompanied it? And in a sense, because you're not going to answer these things so correctly with your intellect. Dreams are on the level of intuition. And this is why superconscious dreams, you're perceiving with the intuitive faculty. So you have to awaken the intuitiveness. That's why when I say feeling, really, I guess maybe that's what I'm saying, the intuitional feeling. But that feeling also sometimes, like in anxieties, stimulates. And usually when you're stimulated, that's usually that almost always this says it's not a superconscious dream, because you're excited physically. So, but you're right. Meditate on it, intuitively think about it with that part of your consciousness, and perhaps you'll get insight. But keep an open mind. The insight may be perceptive, and it may be maybe somewhat perceptive. So keep an open mind. But this would apply to dreams that are strong or repetitive, rather than just the casual dreams most dreams are just casual. A near-death experience. Where will we put an ear? Walking over the other side, to the other side for a short time and coming back into body. These, I would say, don't keep an objective frame of mind and observe. So you might say, like, I mean, I mentioned this as I've had these out-of-body experiences. I haven't in many years, but early on I had these experiences when I came onto the meditative path. And I think maintaining for any sort of thing like this, keep an observer's perspective. In other words, observe and keep the Guru's presence with you at those times. And rather than getting involved in it, you see, rather than especially when you come back into the body, into the mind, you start hashing it over with your intellect and your mind. It's the intuition. If you have a very strong dream like that, when you wake up, if you can remember to do so, sit up and meditate and go into your meditation, look up in the spiritual eye and ask the Gurus if there's some guidance in this dream for you. And the tendency is to get up and immediately thinking about it from the intellectual mind, which tends to drive away the intuitive feeling that was there when you were having the dream. But if you can recall the intuitional side as soon as possible afterward, you're more likely to get that intuitive feeling of what the guidance might have been in a dream. Question here about what if I see someone close trying to let's see, oops, I lost it here. Oh, trying to hurt me or harm me or kill me in my dream. Again, don't necessarily project that onto the other person. Let's say you have a brother. My brother's trying to knock me out and get rid of me, and so therefore I wake up and I have some anger toward my brother. No, that's not necessarily your first response to these. These are projections of your own subconsciousness onto the screen of dreams. So, but so you have to introspect. What does that mean to you? Is it perhaps fear? Perhaps that, and it's not necessarily, let's say in my case, I said my brother, who by the way is long gone now, but it's not that person necessarily, probably not, but that form, that image is representative of somebody close to you. Is other person, do you feel defensive? So I think first reflect it on your own self rather than immediately thinking it's prophetic and it's a real situation with somebody outside of yourself. What is it representing to you? And like I say, intellectualizing these things, sometimes they're just passing fancies. And you think, oh, that was interesting. Why am I thinking that? It's like sometimes during the day, you have some fantasy about hurting somebody. And you think, oh, why in the world did that thought? Oh, well, maybe I have some anger issue regarding that person or generally, but it's not necessarily a real thing. It's some just passing fancy that comes into all of our minds. So don't take these things too seriously and you do that by stepping back and observing it. Playing the observer when you meditate is an important thing, because you know how it is when we meditate. These things come and they pass across our screen and they want to engage us and to follow them and get involved in them in that way. The same thing is happening with dreams. And so we have to maintain that objective position. But if they're super conscious of in nature, well, then it may be something to pay attention to. And then you sit back and you wake up and you think about it in that way. But again, I think this is why Master cautioned about dreams and why Swami didn't recommend trying to analyze one's dreams. because it engages us in superficial things and that are not true. And we don't have the wisdom usually to gain a correct insight into them. And it can lead us more often than not astray. That said, but you see, there's always the but. If it crosses a certain threshold of intuitive meaning to you, then it pays attention. You pay attention. And this is why we have to learn, probably through our own experience, where that point is of just forget it, go on with your life, versus, I need to take it into meditation and think about this a little bit. And that point is the inner feeling of superconscious contact, and if it's repetitive, then it's something to pay attention to. In my dreams, I have got many times a push from someone from heightened building towards down, and get a feeling of yes, and a fear about falling. And what was that? I'm gonna look this up in my notes about falling in dreams. In real life, the phobia of heights, because I I have that too. I couldn't live in an apartment building up on the 22nd floor. It would just, I'd go out on the deck and I'd look out over the edge and I go, oh. But that fear of falling, actually flying is one thing. Something, ever had a sense of flying in the dreams? Flying tends to indicate spiritual development, but falling, if I can find in my notes here, I remember, I can't find it exactly, but the reason I thought about this one, because it was indicative. The feeling of falling is, one master said, one should control one's sexual thoughts. So how's that for an answer? I knew it was in there somewhere. If you ever felt that you're falling and you're going down, it's stimulated by, that's what Master said. And that fear of falling that comes in a dream world. Now, I don't think that necessarily applies in daily life, because I think this is just a natural, being on a cliff and looking down, and that agoraphobia, I think they call it. That's just a natural instinctual reaction. And how to overcome it. Let's see if Master said anything more about that. Let's see. He said, Master said, it's a call for us to develop the willpower. It's you could sort of say it's a bodily instinct. It's falling in dreams is a stimulation of instincts, bodily instincts. And so when bodily instincts call us to do something, our conscious will is not engaged, you see. And in dreams, this would be very natural, where conscious will is, you might say, sleeping. And so consequently, instinct is taking over our body. So what Master says is it's a call that we need to develop our willpower. And so I think sexuality is one of the most basic instinctual drives, but it could also be that instinct for self-preservation also. And if you take it even a little bit more expansive, you could say that our willpower, we're falling, which means we've lost control of our will. And it's a call, the subconscious calling to us to strengthen our will, not just for sexuality, but for anything in life, because without a strong will, we can't make spiritual progress. So I think that's a little bit my interpretation, placed on top of what Master said. I I repeatedly see dreams of water. Longer time sometimes is pleasant and is frightening. Does it mean spiritual progress or anything else? Again, I think coming back to the image of water, in generally, water is said to be a generally a positive thing, auspicious thing. But I'm going to check my notes here. I guess here's what Master said about water. Water represents the results of divine perceptions attainable by meditation. So I guess you could say it's calling us. The potential for spiritual results are before us. And so they have a representation or a symbolic representation. So generally, I would interpret that as mildly positive. Now, drowning might be something else entirely. That's a fear dream. But as long as there's no fear there, I think that's probably a positive thing. Again, raw water in every dream, some form or another. Again, I think that's the third one here we've seen in these questions about water. You know, fluidity of water, water has this sense of being flexible, reminding us to be able to flow with the currents of life. You might say it's calling us to be more like that, and perhaps calling us to not be rigid and to be a little bit more accepting and open to possibilities in life. There are elements like that, and the possibilities of spiritual development that are before us if we can release those things that are binding us so tightly. So in that sense, I think water is the positive side of it. The negative side of water is that it's a lack of solidity, a lack of firmness, a fluidity. So that you would have to judge it here by the feeling that accompanies it and you might say the surrounding attitudes that go with that. Is it positive? Is it calling us to be less obsessive? Is it calling us to be less stuck, you might say, in whatever it is that's stuck in it? So is it calling us or is it reassuring us, you see? What would dreams of old buildings and old houses where one has lived and whence sometimes mean? Now this, of course, dreams also have an element of memory involved in it. They can recall pleasant feelings, the past, things that are associated with those buildings. It's not the building itself, but it's the associations those buildings have for you might be what you would be looking at, not the exact image. So you might see a new building, an old building, but what is it? Is it stimulating a recollection that is important to you? Master did say something about buildings, like a house, building a house particularly. I had recently had a very strong dream about building houses. I was building a house very fervently in this dream. And at first, I thought there was two meanings I took to it. One is it was a memory dream because in my younger years, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was in construction trade. And so I thought, well, maybe that's just a memory of that. And I was looking for the association for it. But then also, I remembered, and I looked it up to confirm my memory of this, that Master said a vision of houses and building houses can be prophetic in the sense that prosperity is on the way. And I thought, oh, that's good. Prosperity is on the way. But then he qualified it with, he says, prosperity is on the way if some effort is made in that direction. So, and so for myself, I thought, oh, prosperity, maybe it means prosperity is on the way. But then I thought, I don't really want to put effort into material prosperity. That's not where my interest is right now. So I don't know if that, I'm waiting to see if prosperity is going to drop in my lap or not. Probably not. But if I was younger, if I had been, I would probably have wanted to put effort into it. And so you might take it in either of those ways. If you're willing to put effort into something, maybe prosperity is in your future. But again, maybe it's simply memory that's trying to be revived and trying to be stimulated in this regard. So